Good morning everyone and welcome to this month's HubSites webinar. My name is Karen Arthur and I work in the marketing team here at Hub24. Today we're joined by Andrew Rutter, Head of Business Development at Sargon. Andrew will take us through some of the current SAF trends along with an overview of what they are and how they work. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Andrew.
Thanks Karen. It's a great pleasure to do this session with the Hub guys today. We're really proud of the partnership we've got going with our small APRA Funds solution. We think it's pretty innovative and something new and interesting in the marketplace. And we'll cover that a bit today. Firstly, that's me there, the very handsome gentleman, been around the block a few times, done a few things, but currently running business development for Sargon across a range of things. And I might just, before I dive into the SAF bit, just give you a quick overview of what Sargon do. You've probably noticed a smattering of branding around buses and trams and in airports and in papers of late. And that's very much a brand build awareness campaign of what we're about and what we do. So I'll touch on that very briefly. We're a trustee at the heart of it, APRA licensed trustee, but we're trying to go about things in a different way. We're trying to replumb superannuation funds. So we're very much looking to embrace technology and use that to engage our promoters of super funds, our customers, and maintain a good compliance regime. So it's really about retooling infrastructure for us, and we've coined this concept of a trustee cloud, which embraces all the various solutions that we're delivering out to our clients. We're across three financial markets, being Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, with licences in each. About 50 billion assets under trusteeship, which is our kind of term for FUA, I guess. Revenues are strong. We've got a breadth of staff across multiple locations, numbering about 120 at the moment. And a metric we use often is our engagement with our clients, of how often we're engaging in terms of approving information, disclosures and documents. So we measure that quite carefully, so we're really building that out. Essentially what people benefit from when they engage with Sargon as opposed to another trustee is a very mature governance, risk and compliance framework. That's what we get paid to do. That's our job, being the umpire and the governor. But we're trying to do it with this technology. So we've not got silos. Everyone's working on clients together. We've got commercial people working with compliance people to ensure we've got combined oversight. We've got workflow systems to make sure that our service standards are measured, and obviously if you measure something, you can control it and improve it. But that's kind of where we're coming from. And this trustee cloud development that I mentioned, I'll just touch on that very briefly because it's a bit of an amorphous concept. We've got an impact CRM which we provide to promoters of our super funds, so that enables them to digitally onboard members. That's a super match process as well, so they can go and find lost super as they're engaging members, whether they're doing it via an advisor or direct. We also provide them with a CRM so they can manage their fund members. So that's everything from sending them messages, marketing material, etc. It's watching where they're invested, how they're invested, the gap between a super contribution and where it gets invested. So it really allows them live and online to drive their fund. The Sentinel piece is really all about us monitoring. So we use AI in this space to monitor the websites and all of the portals of our super funds. So proactively we know when they're changing things. And we map and code all the sensitive material, such as rates of return, asset allocations, all these sorts of things. And if any of that changes, we're not relying on humans to tell us, we already know. At the centre of it, Arcadia is our collaborative workspace, and this is where we're trying to do away with email and phone. We're really much trying to get to a secure portal where we can discuss and collaborate with our promoters. So they can lodge things for application and for approval. They know who's got it, when the turnaround time is going to happen, and they can send notes through that system. So in APRA's eyes, they can see that we're monitoring and auditing every interaction we're having with our super funds. That's important for us to do, and it's also actually a time-saving outcome for our clients because they know what's happening and they don't have to make many phone calls to find out where things are at. Metropolis is a piece where, in our world, we monitor hundreds of PDSs and this is our method of monitoring that. So we effectively code every PDS. When a PDS comes up for renewal, we're only reviewing the bits that have changed, not the whole document again. So this saves us a fair bit of time and money on legal and compliance resources as well. So that's very much a major improvement, something we're rolling out across the business. The pay piece, we have a corporate trust business, and that's a payment portal. They run thousands of bank accounts, and they've got scheduled payments at different frequencies. So this is a system we've built, kind of like internet banking, where the authorisations are built in and we can process things using technology rather than manual processes. And at the end, Decimal is a business we bought. It's robo-advice or e-advice or rules-based advice, and particularly designed to plug into industry super funds, corporate super funds, larger funds, where they need a member to self-service themselves around intra-fund advice or contributions and those sorts of things. Fully SOA driven, fully independent of advice and plumbed in and configured into the underlying fund. So they're kind of the things we're building out, which is plumbing, as I said before, and we're continuing on that pathway. So that's just a snapshot of Sargon. I want to get into the SAF now. A SAF is essentially an SMSF with a professional APRA licensed trustee. So it's effectively got all of the flexibility within some boundaries of an SMSF, but we take on the responsibility of the compliance of the fund and obviously the governance of the fund. And it's a particularly interesting time when you've got trustees living longer than before, and you've got a lot of wealth built up in SMSFs. I think the average balance is 1.1 million now. So members are becoming concerned and trustees are becoming concerned about what happens with their SMSF, their assets, and obviously the beneficiaries, should they no longer be able to take care of it. So this might be an alternative where you've got people concerned about their time or the capacity to deal with their SMSF administration. A SAF is pretty much structured like an SMSF, however it is APRA licensed as opposed to ATO licensed. So there are some advantages to that, where you're picking up more protections under the SIS Act. But it's important to note when you move to a SAF, if you do from an SMSF, we take on the full responsibility to manage the fund, which includes the risk management, obviously all the legislative liaison with APRA and all the admin and tax reporting and tax lodgement, etc. So I'm just going to go through a few reasons why you would consider a SAF. The first one is age. Look, a third of trustees, SMSF trustees, are over 65 and almost 10% are over 75. So at some point, people are going to get to a point where they don't want to look after them anymore, or potentially they don't have the capacity to look after them anymore. So that's one of the key reasons we see that people might be getting to a point where they're in pension, they're in love with their assets, but not necessarily in love with their admin. So they might want to consider whether moving it to a SAF is beneficial for them. Similarly, disturbingly, and I think many of us have been through this, I certainly have, the statistics around dementia and Alzheimer's are alarming. 1 in 10 people over 65 are getting diagnosed, 3 in 10 over 85. It's a significant issue for women. So at some point as advisors, you'll be reaching a point where you go, at what point do I take the keys to the SMSF off my trustee client? And a SAF might provide you with a solution in this space, because these stats, unfortunately, aren't going away anytime soon. The other one we're getting a lot of is residency, and there's two reasons. There's people working overseas and living overseas, but I pulled these stats off a few different websites. It's around about 3.5% of the population work overseas at any point. So what that means is if you are living overseas for a period of time, and advisors should know this, if you lose the central control in Australia of running the SMSF, you therefore might lose the tax concessions on the SMSF. So residency is a big one. People try and cope for this in different ways, where they might have family or friends as executors based here and they instruct from overseas, but that's probably an untenable situation long term. So this is a big one that we're facing. So the working overseas one is a massive issue. And then I'm also getting a few at the moment where people are living overseas. So this is the classic globe-trotting grey nomads. Everyone's living, chasing the sun, Italy, going everywhere they need to go. And they're staying away for longer times, or they've got family that live overseas and they're going to visit for periods of time. So again, they might fail the residency and the central control issues. And the stats there, are fantastic. I think it's great. I've been on one of these cruises, probably 20 years too young to go on one, but it's great that people can travel, when they're older in a safe environment. So I think this trend is going to continue. And if you read the papers on a Sunday, there's that many ads for these cruises. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So that's a big one. The other one is where you've got certain allowable assets in an SMSF, and we all know people that have got a range of different assets that probably wouldn't be able to be wound down to a hub platform, for instance, and one of them is property. A lot of Australians love property, and there's a lot of property in SMSFs, be it land or medicos with their medical practice in there, or a family business and the property associated with that. So often when you're winding down an SMSF to retail, property trigger, and do you really want to sell the property? So it may be a reason where people are in love with that property to keep the fund, but just replace the trustees. So we see a little bit of that as well. Obviously, if you're moving from an SMSF to a SAF, the fund does not change at all, so you don't have a CGT event. So all you're really doing, if you're moving from an SMSF to a SAF, is retiring the trustee and appointing a new trustee, but the fund retains its ABN and TFN, so there's no tax event. Another reason might be bankruptcy, and we've had a couple of these lately where there's disqualified individuals for one reason or another, can't be a director of a company, and in this case, bankruptcy, can't be a trustee on a SAF. So that's a situation that might be time-bound, where they move to a SAF and they could always potentially move back to an SMSF down the track. Estate planning and disability are other reasons, and as planners you'd have any number of situations where you're trying to get the right outcomes in blended families to get, obviously, people that have a pension that need to be reliably paid, where the trustees might be getting older. You might want some protection around ensuring that relative or sibling gets the income that they're beneficially entitled to. And the other one's an estate planning tool. It might provide you with a more reliable way of executing the wishes of trustees and members. And the final two are really around scrutiny-based things. ASIC are having a very good look at the compliance of SMSFs, and there was a report done last year that you'd probably be aware of that looked at SMSFs and looked at the accountants and advisors associated with those, and a lot of them failed compliance with best interest duty and related obligations. And many are out of date in terms of they haven't lodged returns for a couple of years. So there's concerns from the regulator in that context about member best interest. And the ATO scrutiny is one that's well known, where when new SMSFs are being set up, there's often calls made by the ATO to the trustee inquiring about why you've set up an SMSF, and do you understand your roles and responsibilities. And I know many of us on this webinar would be able to answer that quite easily, but the question would be whether our clients can. And I even had a case last week where we had an overseas resident, the daughter was the executor on the SMSF here, and the ATO was interrupting emails instructing investment directions. So Big Brother is watching in that case. So I think we're in an environment, unfortunately, where we're going to see continued scrutiny in the space and potentially increasing legislation. So a SAF might just be a good alternative to avoid this sort of thing. I've just included this table, and the slides will get sent around later, but it just gives you a snapshot of the differences, or the similarities really, because there's not a lot of differences. Obviously the regulator's different. Obviously there's member control is different. You've obviously got the trustee being different, which means there's some fees associated with being trustee that there aren't ordinarily with an SMSF. But you're also picking up many of the benefits of the APRA regulations. So I won't dive through that. That'll be available for you to walk through when you get the slides. But I did want to touch on some of the assets, the pricing and the process associated, which is the meat and potatoes of the solution. So obviously under allowable assets, everything that's on the Hub 24 menu is available for use by advisors. Obviously property, we're going out with what we call our version 1 vanilla, so we want a single property, unencumbered, so no LRBA. We'll look at multiple properties, that's really just a by exception thing. And we're also looking at private company shares and those sorts of things, the more non-listed pieces at the moment for a version 2. And we use the Macquarie CMA very similarly to how an SMSF would. So that's what gives us the allowable asset range. Obviously, as a super fund, we have to have some guidelines and an investment philosophy. So we've simply chosen 5 pretty broad asset portfolios, if you like, so your conservative balanced growth, etc. But we're leaving it to the advisors to build the portfolios. We're not predicting that. We've left our asset allocation pretty broad. We do monitor the portfolio you select. You'll have to pick one of the boxes to put that portfolio in, but we'll work with you to say whether you're sitting outside of the asset allocation on that. It's our way of saying we didn't want to be building pre-blended portfolios that might not fit with your practice and how you go about running things. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can within some boundaries. Our pricing is constructed of a few different moving parts. Obviously, we're a trustee, so we look after all the registration of each fund, gets registered with APRA, and we liaise with APRA on that. We monitor the asset allocation, as I just indicated, and all the investments. We have to monitor all the appointed admin and custody providers as part of the APRA outsourcing guidelines that we must adhere to. And we've got a portal that really houses all of the applications and all the documents associated with running a SAF. So we charge a fee for that. We've appointed DBA and CSS, which are SMSF administrators who have adapted their processes to support SAF. So they look after all the onboarding, so all the collection of the information that we require, deeds and obviously annual accounts and all the various things that we'll need. They verify our the SMSF trustee, make sure it can be, it's in a state that it can be moved across. They look after all the ongoing administration. This is daily reconciliation of the fund. They do all the tax reporting. They do the tax lodgement and also the prep of the audit packs. They charge a fee for that. Hub charge a fee for the custody of the assets that are held within the platform, as well as obviously all the trading and execution that you'd be familiar with. And the price there obviously varies by the commercial arrangement you have in place with Hub. And the property custody, we use Sandhurst to do that because obviously we hold the property legally and they charge a fee for that. So what I do have for those that are interested in, depending on your AFSL, I work with the Hub team. I've got calculators. We plug in the Hub rate card that's applicable to your AFSL so that you can then model up some scenarios to determine what size SMSF, if it comes across to a SAF, what would the pricing be. So if you're interested in that, my details will be available at the end of the webinar. There are some additional ongoing costs. We've appointed a panel of auditors and they're well-known names, Pitcher Partners, Crowe and Evolve, and they charge differently but max $4.95, including GST. Obviously I've got something wrong there because I think the International Shares Hub charge has changed. That's my bad. So I'm clearly not trained BDM at this point. And there's an APRA levy. There are some setup fees. We have to look at the SMSF or trustee upon application. And if there's anything complicated in there, like it's a really old deed, 20 years old, and it needs some work, there's an hourly rate to get that up to speed. And there's some property setup fees. So that's only to do with property because that's involving things like valuation, conveyancing, those sorts of things. So there's some fees. They're all available in the PDS, which is on our website. The kind of process which I think is important here, we need to do a few things to get you ready if this is of interest to you. Obviously, our PDS is available on the website. Obviously, you have the Hub PDS. We need to confirm your price points, so that early work around the pricing calculator is important, so you can understand the cost of this service versus what you're currently paying for an SMSF administration, for example. I need to register you, as do Hub, if you're not already registered. And we need to get you some login details for our portal, which is the way you apply for a SAF. So some preliminary work up front. Then we're really into, once we've done all of that, we talk to you about what clients you've got, because I'd rather do that work up front, work through the cases, work through the assets before you get to a point where you've lodged and then you get knocked back. So I'm available to work with you on all of that. We've got advisor guides to take you through the whole process of how everything moves and shakes. That includes how all the documents get pre-populated. We've got a very good system which relies on the information inputs and generates all of the formwork that you require to make it easy for you to have a client signing ceremony, if you like. And if you do need to finalise up an SMSF tax return, we can offer that service as well for an additional cost to get it up to date and then move it across. When you're ready to move and ready to apply, there's the portal. DBA will work with you, or I will, to make sure that we've got everything we need. If we accept it, we go and register with APRA. And then the process of conveyancing begins, or transitions. So obviously you sign with your client as in specie across to Hub from wherever the assets are resident. DBA gets involved in the property conveyance and we're up and running. So there's a process there, and I guess before during that process you've got SOA and client consents and all of those things going on. So that process, probably from end to end, could probably take 2 to 3 months. The APRA registration piece, they're telling us we've already gone through a process with them, obviously, and they're saying about 10 days. So there is a process in here that will take a little bit longer than potentially an SMSF establishment, for example. So that's the process. We're here to help you. That's my details and my colleague Mark. You'll have those details when the information comes around, but equally via your local Hub 24 BDM. They all know me. We're working hand in glove on this opportunity. And DBA, if you did have an application and you were in the middle of the process, they're available to help you. There is a website there that has all of the available PDSs, investment booklets, all that sort of thing that you could require.